being here, under the gaze of the old gods, in the shadow of the ancient philosophers, in the heart of this modern city, has a unique thrill to it. There's an aura of mystery about Athens. The past is always somehow present. It's here that deep thinking and knowledge, as we experience them, were born.
Socrates, Athena, Plato, Apollo, Athens, the cradle of civilization. Its long and glorious history begins with Athena, the goddess of wisdom, whose name the city bears. The Parthenon is her temple. Parthenos means virgin, for Athena was a virgin goddess. It's up here that she challenged Poseidon, the god of the seas, for possession of the city, and defeated him. And Athens became the city of wisdom, and was so regarded for 1,000 years. We still look back at it with awe.
Wisdom and knowledge. What's the difference? Aristotle, who at 18 came down here from Thrace to study with Plato, said wisdom is a form of goodness. Not scientific knowledge, but another kind of cognition. So wisdom comes first, the basic gift of a goddess to mankind, and scientific knowledge follows. It was with the 7 sages that Greek philosophy was born in the 6th century BC. 7 exceptional personalities famous for their wisdom and prudence. After them came Heraclitus, Anaximander, and other philosophers from the Ionian school. Then Pythagoras, then the Sophists, then Socrates, Plato, and the golden age of philosophy. We think of that now as the age of Pericles, the 5th century BC, when the Parthenon was built. 150 years before that, the chief archon here was Solon, one of the 7 sages, and a political reformer. He introduced trial by jury, courts for the poor to be heard in, and laws governing taxation. It was Solon who laid the foundations of democracy. To learn more about Solon and the other 6 sages of antiquity, we must travel back through 27 centuries to the sanctuary at Delphi. And here we are at Delphi on Mount Parnassus, where the 7 sages of Greece are having one of their meetings. But this meeting is different. Today, they will settle their famous dispute over the golden tripod by offering it to the god Apollo. The case of the golden tripod is one of many stories in the rich lore of Greek mythology, and there are several versions. The most usual is that Helen of Troy had a golden tripod with her on her voyage back from Troy to Sparta. And since there was a prophecy that this tripod would become a cause of war, she dropped it into the sea. Years later, fishermen from the island of Kos hauled in a net, and before examining the catch, sold it, sight unseen, to some people from Miletus, down the Ionian coast from Troy. When the tripod was found among the fish, it did cause a war. The people of Kos claimed they had only sold the fish to the Milesians, but the Milesians said they had bought the whole catch. When the war threatened to destroy them, they sent messengers here to the Delphic oracle. asking for a decision. And the priestess decreed that the golden tripod should be given to the wisest of men. This was something both parties could agree on. Thales of Miletus, one of the 7 sages, was in his own time widely regarded as the wisest of men and considered by the Greeks to be the father of science. They sent the tripod to him. But Thales declined the gift, saying that Bias of Priam was wiser than he was, and the tripod was sent on to Bias. But Bias wouldn't take it either. He announced that Solon of Athens was the wisest of men. And so the golden tripod passed from sage to sage until finally they all agreed that only Apollo could be the first in wisdom, and the tripod today will be offered to him. There's another version of this story that refers to a golden goblet rather than a tripod. But whichever legend we prefer, one thing stands out. The chief virtue of the sages was humility. Socrates agreed. He called humility the basis of wisdom. Sage, from the Latin for wise. We use it to mean someone who is profoundly wise, practical, prudent, someone with good judgment. And the 7 sages of ancient Greece were practical, prudent, earthly men. Most of them took an interest in politics, and all of them coined maxims about everyday life that are still remembered.
Σοφότατος χρόνος, ανευρίσκηγα πάντα.
Time is the wisest of things, for it finds out everything.
Μη προτρεχέτω η γλώσσα της διανοίας.
Let not your tongue outrun your thought.
Γυράσκοδαί πολλά διδασκόμενος.
The older I become, the more I learn.
Αρχή άνδρα δείκνηση.
Power shows the man.
Πίσας λαβέ, μη βιασάμενος.
Gain your point by persuasion, not by force.
Μέτρον άριστος.
Temperance in all things.
Ευτυχόν μεν μέτριος είστε, ατυχόν δε φρόνιμος.
Be moderate in prosperity, prudent in adversity.
In future times, historians would debate whether Myson of Henaim should be included among the 7 sages, instead of Periander of Corinth. Plato was the first to say that. Centuries later, Diogenes Laertius, the biographer of ancient Greek philosophers, voted for Periander. The Victorian clergyman Ebenezer Cobham Brewer, whose mythological dictionary is a standard work, wrote a little poem on the subject. First, Solon, who made the Athenian laws. Then Hilo in Sparta, renowned for his saws. In Miletus did Thales astronomy teach. Bias used in Priam his morals to preach. Cleobulus of Lindos was handsome and wise. Mitylene, against thraldom, saw Pittacus rise. Periander is said to have gained through his court the honor that Myson, the Henian, ought. Very witty. Of course, it helps to be an Englishman. 7 sages. Why 7? The number has always carried a sacred weight. That wise old theosophist Helena Blavatsky has explained it to us. The astronomical origin of the number 7, says Madame Blavatsky, is established beyond any doubt. Man, feeling himself time out of mind, dependent upon the heavenly powers, ever and everywhere, made earth subject to heaven. The largest and brighter of the luminaries thus became, in his sight, the most important and highest of powers. Such were the planets which the whole of antiquity numbered as 7. In course of time, these were transformed into 7 deities. As I said, Greek philosophy actually begins with the 7 sages of the 6th century BC, a period of broad intellectual and social evolution in all the Greek city-states. It is the age of the rise of democracy, the empowerment of the middle class, and the liberation of knowledge from the monopoly of the priests and the initiates of the mysteries. The enlightened were setting up schools of philosophy and offering education on a broader scale. Written laws replaced the oral tradition. Architecture, medicine, music, poetry, drama. All the fine arts began to flourish. Helon's aphorism, Gnothi Safton, or Know Thyself, is inscribed in golden letters on the entrance to Apollo's temple. Gnothi Safton is in the spirit of Greek philosophy. Simple, direct, practical. Perhaps not possible, as Socrates would later say, but as an aspiration, it has the beautiful Greek simplicity. The Spartan Helon, an unrivaled aphorist, will be here soon to meet with the other sages.
Sparta, the birthplace of Helon, a legendary city that played an important role in ancient Greek history. Mythology tells us that it was founded by Lacedaemon, the son of Zeus, and Taigete, who married Sparta, the daughter of Eurotas. Lacedaemon gave his name to the whole region. His mother, Taigete, gave her name to the mountain which embraces Sparta, and the Eurotas is the river upon whose banks the strict education of the young Spartans was carried out to turn them into brave soldiers. They learned discipline, toughness, and to endure pain, and served as soldiers till the age of 60. The main characteristics of Spartan society, then, were simplicity, discipline, and order, incorporated into a strict military regime. A society diametrically different from the Athenian in ideology, culture, and philosophical approach to life. However, in this city-state, which seemed to lack intellectual values and deep thinking, one of the wisest minds of antiquity was born. Helon, the son of Damagetus, was distinguished as an ephor of Sparta. He was the one to introduce institutional reforms that strengthened the power of the ephors, the elected governing officials. He was a man of exceptional wisdom, admired for his accurate judgments, but also admired for his poetry. Of the 200 elegiac verses he wrote, the best known is "Gold is best tested by a whetstone hard, which gives a certain proof of purity, and gold itself acts as the test of men, by which we know the temper of their minds." Helon's main characteristic, however, was his terse way of speaking. It is due to him that this manner, the Spartan or laconic manner, became defined as prudent speech and short sentences full of meaning. Consequently, his sayings remain immortal.
Ταχύτερον επί τας ατυχίας των φίλων ή επί τας ευτυχίας πορεύεστε.
Tread more rapidly through the misfortunes of your friends than through their good fortune.
Ζημίαν ερίστε μάλλον ή κέρδος ες χρόνο.
Prefer a loss to a dishonest gain.
Μη επιθυμήν αδυνάτων.
Do not desire the impossible.
Γύρας ημάν.
Honor old age.
Θυμού κρατήν.
Restrain anger.
Ατυχούντι μη επιγελάν.
Do not laugh at a person in misfortune.
Χρόνου φίδου.
Spend your time wisely.
The gods loved Helon, and they gave him what the Greeks thought of as their ultimate gift, to die in the arms of his son, who had just been victorious at the Olympic Games.
From the border region of Sparta came also Myson, an exceptional personality. History might have refused him the honor of being among the seven, but the priests of Delphi proclaimed him far wiser in his deep mind than any other. Myson is described as a sage of a rather obscure and sour character. He was often heard to say that men ought not to seek for things in words, but for words in things, for that things are not made on account of words, but that words are put together for the sake of things.
Myson kept a low profile, and because of that was regarded as a misanthropist. He did avoid public appearances, and in fact he won't be at this year's meeting of the sages. Neither will Periander. He died 8 years ago. And there is reason to doubt whether Periander should be counted as one of the seven. But despite his many vices, he had the virtues of a sage. He was the tyrant of Corinth. For 40 years, the absolute ruler of the city.
Under the shadow of Acrocorinthos, the citadel rock, lie the ruins of ancient Corinth, one of the most powerful and prosperous city-states of antiquity. Corinth flourished from the 7th century BC, and it was under the rule of Periander that it reached its peak of greatness. The Corinthians played a leading role in ancient Greek history, taking part in the famous naval battles of Salamis and of Mycale against the Persians. In 338 BC, Philip of Macedonia, the father of Alexander the Great, defeated the Corinthians, captured their city, and made it the center of the League of Corinth. 2 centuries later, the Romans invaded the region and destroyed the city, which was rebuilt during the reign of Julius Caesar. The new Corinth flourished and became the administrative capital of the Roman province of Achaia. Periander came into power in 628 BC, succeeding his father Kypselos. He was an open-minded ruler, maintaining friendly relations with other tyrants. He established many colonies and raised Corinth into a powerful commercial center. But he had a dark side. The historian Herodotus calls him savage, a tyrant in all senses, who killed his wife and sent his son into exile. He had no second thoughts about executing anyone who opposed him. However, it must also be said that his reputation as a cruel ruler may well have been instigated by the Corinthian nobility, with whom he dealt harshly. Whatever the truth may be, there is no doubt that Periander gained immortality through his wise maxims.
Μελέτη το πάντα.
Attention is everything.
Επισφαλές προπέτεια.
Rashness is perilous.
Εμένη δονέ θαρτέ, εδέκεινε αθάνατη.
Pleasures are mortal, honors immortal.
Φίλης ευτυχούσι και ατυχούσι, ο αυτός ίστη.
Be the same toward your friends in their prosperity or in their adversity.
Ο ανομολογήσεις διατήρη.
Keep your promises.
Μηδέν χρημάτων ένεκα πράττει.
Do nothing for the sake of money.
Δυστυχόν κρύπτε, ή να μη τους εχθρούς εφράνεις.
Keep your misfortune to yourself, to avoid making your enemies happy.
Λόγων απορρίτων, εκφοράν μη ποιού.
Betray no secret.
Periander was a sponsor of the arts and of education, and according to Aristotle, he devised ways to keep the citizens always busy in order to prevent them from conspiring against him. It was probably this notion that forced him to undertake a giant project far above the technical capabilities of his time, to try to cut a naval passage through the isthmus that joined Attica and the Peloponnesus. He did not succeed, neither did the Roman Emperor Nero, who tried the same ambitious project in 67 AD. Many centuries had to pass till 1893, when the Corinth Canal was finally opened. But Periander did manage to construct the famous Diolkos, a stone road over which slaves and sailors dragged the ships on wheeled platforms from the eastern port to the western port. An ingenious achievement, certainly.
I should mention that Periander cancelled the project of digging a canal at Corinth to connect the Adriatic and the Aegean seas, not only because it was beyond the technical capacity of the times, but also because the oracle discouraged him. Delphi, the navel of the world, as the ancients called it, had an immense impact on the spiritual values of the time and on the practical politics. Rulers, generals, businessmen, all were guided by it. Apollo, the god of light, harmony, and music, was at home here. And it's easy to see why philosophy and the other arts and sciences were his concerns. Thales of Miletus, the one to whom the golden tripod was originally given, is expected to join the others here soon in the sacred sanctuary. Halepan eefton none, he said. It's hard to know yourself. We can only agree.
Miletus was one of the most important centers of philosophy and science in antiquity. As for Thales, he is considered to be the first Greek philosopher because he was the first to give a purely natural explanation of the origin of the world, free from all tinges of the mythological. He claimed that water is the primordial element from which everything comes into being and into which everything passes away. Thales was also the one to affirm that the souls of men are immortal. He studied astronomy, foretelling the eclipses and motions of the sun. They say that he was the original definer of the seasons of the year, and that it was he who divided the year into 365 days. Furthermore, he was a man of the greatest wisdom in political matters. Miletus was one of the 12 Ionian cities near the coast of Asia Minor. It was the natural outlet for products from the interior of Anatolia and had a considerable wool trade with the Greek colonies in southern Italy. According to mythology, the city was founded by a hero named Miletus, who fled from the island of Crete to escape from King Minos. The city flourished from the 7th century BC and rose to become a maritime empire. However, by the end of the 6th century BC, the Persians captured Miletus and punished severely the Milesians who tried to revolt. the city was freed of Persian rule after the Greek victories against the Persians and joined the Athenian-dominated Delian League. Alexander the Great captured Miletus after a siege in 334 BC, which opened its Hellenistic period. Later on, the city received special attention from the Roman emperors, retaining its commercial importance till the 6th century AD. Thales travelled a lot, and when he was in Egypt, he came up with a way to calculate the height of the pyramids by measuring their shadow. He liked to calculate measures in general, and among his many discoveries in geometry is the one that any triangle drawn within a circle has right angles. God is the most ancient of all things, for he had no birth, he used to say. And the world is the most beautiful of things, for it is the work of God. Space is the greatest, for it holds all things. The swiftest is mind, for it speeds everywhere. Necessity is the strongest, for it masters all. And time is the wisest, for it brings everything to light. Thales defined the happy man as the one who is healthy in body, resourceful in soul, and of a readily teachable nature. In his renowned maxims, all his wisdom and deep knowledge is reflected.
Ασφαλές το γενόμενο, ασαφές το μέλλον.
What has happened is certain. What will happen is not.
Φθονού μάλλον ή κτήρου.
It is better to be envied than pitied.
Αργός μη ήστι, μη δαν πλουτής.
Don't remain inactive, even if you are wealthy.
Της επιτηδής σύγχρον.
Seek the company of clever people.
Δίδασκε και μάνθανε το άνοιγμα.
Teach and learn what is the best.
Μη πάση πίστευε.
Do not trust everybody.
Α της άλλης επιθυμόμεν, αυτή μη δρόμεν.
That for which we blame others, let us not do ourselves.
While we're time traveling, let's notice that Pythagoras, the great philosopher and mathematician, will start his career as Thales' student. So will the early scientist Anaximander.
Not far from Miletus stand the ruins of ancient Priene, a city that was one of the most influential in the Ionian Confederacy. Priene is located on a slope at the foot of a great cliff of rock, and it is said that the plan of the city was based on that of Athens. No one who visits the place can fail to be impressed by the landscape and the whole surrounding atmosphere. The Ionians were the first to arrive and settle here in the 11th century BC. There is, however, some doubt as to whether the founder of the city was Egyptus of Athens or Philotas of Thebes. In the 7th century, Priene came under Lydian rule, and in the 6th century it was conquered by the Persians. Later on, the city was destroyed completely by the Persian king Darius during a revolution. When Priene was besieged by the Persians, all the citizens began to flee from the city, trying to carry away their valuable possessions. However, there was a man who remained unmoved, and on being asked if he had no possessions he wished to save from the enemy, he replied, "All my wealth is in my head." This man was Bias, a philosopher and philanthropist famous for his eloquence, which he often used to defend innocent people in court.
Bias's wisdom is unique, and he himself values it highly.
Wisdom is the best way to travel from youth to old age, he says, for it is more lasting than any other possession. And this one I like especially. Life should be lived as if it were very long and as if it were very short.
Bias was the pride of Priene. By many he is considered to be the wisest of the 7 wise men, esteemed for his patriotism, the nobility of his character, his flawless judicial judgment, and his eloquence. Love prudence was one of Bias's famous sayings. In fact, prudence is the main element characterizing all of his maxims.
Μη ταχύ λαλήν, μανίαν γάρ ενθένει.
Do not speak fast, for that shows folly.
Ανάξιον άνδρα μη επένει δια πλούτων.
Do not praise an undeserving man because of his riches.
Νόσον ψυχής το των αδυνάτων εράν.
It is a disease of the soul to desire impossible things.
Ατυχή είναι τον ατυχίαν μη φέρονται.
He who cannot bear misfortune is truly unfortunate.
Άκουε πολλά, λάλη κέρια.
Listen much, but take your time before speaking.
Bias is known for his wisdom, but he was also a brilliant military strategist when the Persians were besieging Priene. Another military genius is Pittacos of Mytilene on Lesbos, the oldest of the 7. When the Mytileneans were at war with Athens, Pittacos was their general and won them a brilliant victory. He was enormously popular, and after the war his fellow citizens made him their dictator. But he didn't exploit his power. By all accounts he governed prudently and honestly, kept democratic principles in view, made good laws, granted amnesty to his enemies, and held to his belief that forgiveness is better than punishment. After 10 years, he resigned.
Mytilene, or Lesbos, as it is more commonly known, is one of the earlier inhabited islands in the Aegean Sea. Discoveries of prehistoric fauna and fish have revealed a history going back more than 2 million years. And there is archaeological evidence of an important culture here during the Bronze Age. Mythology has it that Macaros, the son of Helios, was the founder of the 5 main cities of the island, which primarily was named Macaria. Homer relates in his epics that Achilles attacked Lesbos, and it was here that he captured Briseis, the beautiful girl that Agamemnon took from him, thus starting their mighty quarrel. Lesbos is the birthplace of the celebrated lyric poet Sappho, who remains immortal through the centuries for the beauty of her verses. The island was a center of artistic and philosophical achievement and a great maritime power during the 7th century BC. Later on, it was occupied by the Persians and subsequently by the Athenians, the Macedonians, and the Romans in 88 BC. Pittacus was for the Mytileneans a great statesman, and they prospered under his rule. As a lawmaker, he remained famous for having instituted policies whereby any crime committed while drunk deserved twice the penalty as the same crime committed sober. He urged his fellow citizens to cultivate truth, good faith, experience, cleverness, sociability, and industry. And quite often he expressed his favorite maxim: the equal share is more than the greater. Some other of his wise statements are:
Μηδένα προτού τέλους μακάριζα.
Call no one fortunate before he dies.
Ανιαρών αργία.
Idleness is distressing.
Καιρών γνώθη.
Be able to choose the right moment.
Ανάγκα που δε θεοί μάχονται.
Even the gods cannot strive against necessity.
Ω μέλιστην μη λέγε, από τυχόν γαρ καταγελαστήσεις.
Do not say beforehand what you intend to do, for if you fail, you will be ridiculed.
Φίλον μη λέγειν κακός, αλλά μη δε εχθρόν.
Speak no ill of a friend, nor even of an enemy.
Σοφροσύνην φιλήν.
Love temperance.
Ευσέβειαν ασκήν.
Practice piety.
Μη την όψιν καλοπίζουν, αλλά εν της επιτιδεύμασιν ίστη καλός.
Don't try to be beautiful, but try to do beautiful things.
Another islander among the seven sages is Cleobulus, the strong and handsome tyrant of Rhodes. People believe his family descends directly from Hercules. He studied in Egypt, and he writes poetry, usually in the form of riddles.
The island of Rhodes is nowadays one of the most beautiful tourist resorts in the Aegean Sea. Located in a strategic position, it won fame and wealth from antiquity and played a leading role in Mediterranean history. From mythology, we learn that when Zeus defeated the Titans and the giants, he decided to divide the earth among the Olympian gods. Helios, however, god of the sun, happened to be absent at the time of the sharing and was excluded. He complained afterwards to Zeus, and the king of the gods decided to repair the omission by ordering a beautiful island to emerge from the bottom of the sea. That island was Rhodes, and was offered to Helios, who covered it with his divine radiance. Its first inhabitants were the Carians, and later the Phoenicians raised it to an important commercial center. In 1500 BC, the Mycenaean Greeks conquered Rhodes. A few centuries later, the Dorians came here and established 3 major city-states: Lindos, Ialissos, and Kamiros, which grew immensely in wealth and power. The 3 cities created a common administrative center, the city of Rhodes. At the entrance to the port stood the famous Colossus, a gigantic bronze statue more than 30 meters high, dedicated to Helios. Lindos was built on the most impressive site of the island. On this imposing rock, surrounded by sea. A powerful fortress that even the Persians were unable to capture when they conquered the island of Rhodes in 491 BC. The Lindians created colonies in the Mediterranean Sea and participated with 40 ships in the naval battle of Salamis. The fortification of Lindos goes back to the 15th century AD and was built by the Knights of Malta, who occupied the island of Rhodes after the Crusades. Lindos became a center of civilized life, art and culture in the 6th century BC, during the reign of Cleobulus, the tyrant of the city for many years. He was the one who revived the cult of Athena of Lindos and built this magnificent temple on the site of the old sanctuary of Athena, which goes back to the Mycenaean period.
Glotis Kratin,
hold your tongue, is one of Cleobulus' main maxims.
The layering of the centuries is quite visible to the visitor of the Acropolis of Lindos, from early antiquity, through classical and Hellenistic periods, Roman influence, medieval fortifications. Cleobulus's wisdom, however, still echoes through the centuries.
Αρετής οικείων είναι, κακίας αλόκριον.
Seek virtue and eschew vice.
Βία μηδέν πράτην.
Do nothing by force.
Φιλίκων είναι μάλλον η φιλόλαλον.
Be fond of listening rather than of talking.
Ειδονής κρατήν.
Be superior to pleasure.
Αδικίαν φεύγει.
Avoid injustice.
Ευτυχόν μη είστε υπερήφανος. Απορρίσας μη ταπεινούν.
If you gain prosperity, show no arrogance. If you fall into poverty, don't abase yourself.
Τας μεταβολάς της τύχης γενναίος επίστασο φέρει.
Bear the changes of fortune bravely.
Εύτο σώμα έχει και την ψυχήν.
Safeguard the health of both body and soul.
Αλωτρίων μη επιθύμει.
Do not covet what belongs to others.
This year, one of the sages will receive special honors. Solon of Athens. It was Solon who gave expression to the essential Greek virtue, moderation. Nothing in excess, he said. Miden agan.
Athens, the ruins of the ancient agora. In the early 6th century BC, neither the Parthenon nor the temple of Hephaestus, known as the Theseion, were yet built. However, the space of the agora was already the center of social, political and cultural life for the Athenians. Society was dominated by the Eupatridae, the aristocrats who owned the best land and monopolized the government. The intermediate classes of farmers, craftsmen and merchants were deprived of political power. As for the less fortunate, they were easily driven into debt, mortgaging their land and even themselves, thus risking losing their freedom and being sold into slavery. When Solon came into power, he introduced a revolutionary law, the Sesechthia, which means shaking off burdens. With this law, all outstanding debts were forgiven and all land mortgages disappeared, and whoever had become a slave because of his debts was liberated. Solon offered the Athenians a humane code of laws and a balanced constitution. He did not seek perfection in his legislation, believing that the lawmaker must tailor the law to the limits of human nature and not ask too much. He instituted a census of annual income and divided the citizens into 4 income groups accordingly. Political privilege was allotted on the basis of these divisions, though all citizens were entitled to attend the General Assembly, which was entitled to pass laws, elect officials, and hear appeals. He also created a Supreme Court, whose members were former chief rulers of Athens.
Solon is a great politician, prudent and courageous. Don't do what is pleasant, he says. Do what is proper.
Once Solon was asked which city he thought was well governed, and he replied, "The city where those who have not been injured take up the cause of the injured and prosecute the case as earnestly as if the wrong had been done to them. Furthermore, he is quoted as saying, "My laws were not destined to be long of service to the Athenians, for neither the deity nor the lawmakers can be of benefit to the cities by themselves. This is always in the hands of those that are empowered to guide the people as they choose. Therefore, both the deity and the laws, in the case of good governing, are useful, but in the case of misgovernment, they are no use at all." Solon's wisdom is reflected in many other immortal sayings.
Ειδονήν φεύγε, ή της ύστερον λύπην δίκτυ.
Avoid pleasure that brings sorrow afterwards.
Καλοκαγαθίαν, όρκο πιστοτέραν έζε.
Put more trust in nobility of character than in an oath.
Σφραγίζεστε των μεν λόγων σιγή, την δε σιγήν καιρό.
Discourse should be sealed by silence, and silence by opportunity.
Συμβούλευε μη τα ήριστα, αλλά τα άριστα.
Advise not what is most agreeable, but what is best.
Φίλους μη τα χικτώ, ους δαν κτήσει μη αποδοκίμαζε.
Be not hasty in making friends, but do not cast off those who you have made.
Θεού στήμα γονέας εδού.
Honor the gods, respect your parents.
Μη κακής ομίλη.
Avoid bad companions.
Αλήθειαν ανέχου.
Be tolerant enough to accept the truth.
Η αλήθεια πάσας τας τέχνας και τας επιστήμας οσμή.
Truth is the ornament of any arts and science.
Solon the Athenian, Thales the Miletian, Bias the Prienian, Pittacus the Mytilenean, Cleobulus the Lindian, Helon the Lacedaemonian, and the late Periander the Corinthian. The seven sages. They are the bearers of Apollo's wisdom, his presence in the world, and will be remembered that way down to our own time. And here we are back in Athens in the first decade of the 21st century. The Rock of Wisdom overlooking a vast city, the glorious Parthenon, and the wisdom of the seven sages. Still ours, still with us, still the heartbeat of civilization.